All right. So we're having the second census, chapter 26. After the plague, the Lord said to Moses and Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest, take a census of the whole Israelite community by families, all those 20 years old or more who are able to serve in the army of Israel. So on the plains of Moab, by the Jordan, across from Jericho, Moses and Eleazar, the priest, spoke with them and said, take a census of the men 20 years old or more, as the Lord commanded Moshe. And these were the Israelites who came out of Egypt.
Okay. And so now it's going to go into this long rest of the chapter of the actual counting. We're not going to read all of that, but it's very interesting that actually in this study Bible that he has right here, we can see the numbers, the actual numbers, and the bottom line is that in the first census, which they took when they crossed the Red Sea at Mount Sinai, is 603,550. Okay, of men in that category. I know they said there's a couple of million, but remember these are the 20 to 50 basically year olds, men of war. So you got to add the people the men who are above and below that age, which is huge. You know, below 20, there's a lot. Okay, and all the women. So it's a bunch of people. So if this is, anyway, so 603,550 in the second census, which they're doing now. 601,730. So there's a few less. Okay? But a bunch of people just been killed too. Now what's significant about this is when you look at, and it's going to go through every tribe and every in great detail. We have a list here of the actual numbers. And some of them a couple of them have increased fairly dramatically. Let's see. Judah went from 74,600 to 76,500. Issachar went from 54,000 to 64,000. Zebulun from 57,000 to 60,000. So a lot of them came up, but it's also significant that a few of them dropped, and the worst was Simeon, from 59,000 down to 22,000. What's his name? Yeah, and so that's so what's interesting, the guy who is the premier rebel here, who comes out in front of everybody, is from the tribe of Simeon. And so the guess is that given that his house, his leader, he's the one that did this so arrogantly and so boldly, maybe these thousands of people that were killed here, and I forget the number, 24,000 people were largely, not completely, but largely from the tribe of Simeon. And so the other thing too is there's been plagues, there's been other plagues in there and situations where a lot of people burned from a particular tribe, but they've had time. A lot of those happened, 20, 30, 40 years ago. And so they've had time. Some of these tribes that had some pretty significant losses seem to have recovered, whereas just a mathematical issue when they look at it, it's like, well, this just happened. So there would have been no opportunity to recover from it whatsoever as a tribe. So, yeah, I think you're right, and that's a good point, is very likely. And so this kind of is like, be careful who you hang out with. This is also a picture of a generational curse. There's multiple pictures in this situation of generational curses where you see it. Okay? Interesting stuff. So, go ahead.
In Genesis 49, it talked about Simeon and Levi grouped together.
Mm-hmm.
And they were carrying literally a generational curse, like you
sure.
said. It's listed right there in Genesis 49.
Yep.
Yeah, Levi's not there.
Yeah, they didn't number Levi, that's why. Okay, so just a couple of quick things here. I'm going to just jump to, it talks about Dathan and Abiram and what had happened with them, that they were missing, and the situation with Korah in verse 10, that came out and they devoured them with fire. and that became a sign or a warning. Remember in the verse 10 that was what happened and became a warning for everybody else. Nevertheless, in verse 11, the children of Korah did not die, and it says, so God saved a remnant. Not only that, I think I shared the other day that a whole bunch of the Psalms, some of the really nice Psalms like As a Deer, and that's written by the sons of Korah. But if this happened to my great-grandpa, I think I'd like, I'm not going to go down that road. Yeah. And that's the whole goal. I mean, why not learn from the mistakes of your family of the past? Don't repeat the mistake. And I tell young people that especially, so they're not here to hear me, but there are a bunch of them listening online, so I know they're listening. But learn from the mistakes. Yeah, go ahead.
So, we're doing the Midrash on Revelation, and somebody mentioned earlier about Balaam.
Mm-hmm.
So looking at this story, the Father does declare the end from the beginning for sure, because in Revelation we have a religious system and a false prophet. And here we have a religious system called Baal and a false prophet, Balaam. Interesting about the false prophet is he claims to be a follower of Yahweh. And he teaches them, how to turn the table. Well, the people are committing whoredom with Baal, the false religious system. In Revelations, they're committing whoredom with a woman clothed in purple.
False religious system.
There's a plague being poured out. In Revelation, there's plagues being poured out. There's also a group of people who will be zealous for the Torah. And I did look up that word, and it says in the Jusinius Hebrew Chaldee, it says jealousy or zealousness like a husband that has been dispossessed.
Exactly.
So if you think about it, the father is jealous because the people that are supposed to be his bride are committing whoredom with a false religious system.
They're doing the same thing right now as these people were doing.
Right.
Just instead of doing it physically, they're doing it spiritually.
And, in Revelation, it speaks about how they're rebellious and they refuse to repent. Just like the rebellion, Zimri. And but also judgment began. Now, Israel's about to go across the body of water and take the kingdom, but the judgment began with them. Just like the tribulation, the 6 churches that have the opportunity to cleanse themselves and to put on white robes during that tribulation period, they cleansed themselves of those that were committing whoredoms. And then we just read that there was a census, there was a numbering. And the purpose for numbering in the scriptures was, the first time was for war, the second time was who inherits the land. Well, the next thing in Revelation is they number 144,000. And they go to war and they obtain a covenant of peace, just like Phinehas.
That's a great parallel.
Yeah, same story all over again.
Yep. And so basically, as we move to the end of this section of numbering them, which is why it got the name Numbers in English, it's actually called In the Wilderness in Hebrew, because it comes from the time they spent in the wilderness before they crossed the river. And now they're about to do it in verse 65, toward the end there, at verse 65, it said, Yahweh said, surely you will die in the wilderness. And so, actually 64, but among these who were numbered, not a man of those who were numbered by Moses and Aaron the priest numbered. In other words, when they numbered them at Sinai, they said they weren't here because Yahweh had said, that they're going to die in the wilderness. So there was none left except for Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, and Joshua, the son of Nun. And so basically, the murmurers, the whiners, the complainers, they're all dead. They don't get to go in the wilderness. And I'm sorry, they get to die in the wilderness. They don't get to go into the land.
So I have a question.
Okay.
So would it be everyone that came out of Egypt that passed away?
No.
But if you were born and you made it, your mom carried you across?
No, it was just the adults. It was 20 years and older.
Okay, so that means, okay. All right, so
some of these were actually alive, and some of them were, a lot of these the younger people were actually born in the wilderness. So it's a
Right,
combination of both.
okay, and that's what I
So
was
the young
getting at.
people, the young
Yes.
people who came out of, and of course Caleb and Joshua are still alive. Moshe is still alive. So we do have people. Obviously, the older people are still there. It was just that particular group of the rebels, basically the ones that refused. Go ahead. Yeah.
In the book of Revelation, it talked about wormwood is associated with the judgment for infidelity. And there will be a trumpet blown by the angels that will, one of those trumpets, I forget which number it was, will put wormwood in the waters of the earth. And that will judge infidelity against the Father.
Yeah, it's a poison wood. So it actually pointed out something here in this numbering section. I'll mention it because it's actually in 26:33, and it's going to be significant as we start the next chapter. Verse 23, it says, "Now Zelophehad, the son of Heber, had no sons, but had daughters. And the names of the daughters were Zelophehad were Mahlah, Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tirzan." And so they actually got. Now it's interesting. Remember, they're numbering the men of war. Right, in the families and the men and the son and the son and da-da-da-da-da, you have these women named. And why is that? Because now it's become significant. So this sets up actually the next chapter.